Welcome everyone to the 4th episode of Analyzing Evil. In this video, we'll be going over perhaps one of my favorite villains ever created. The tragic figure that is Yevon from Final Fantasy X. As far as villains go, Yevon is rather unique in the way he is presented in the story of Final Fantasy X, as throughout the game the religion that bears his name is regarded as a force for good in the world of Spira. It's only until much later in the game that we find out that Yevon is in fact the source of all of Spira's woes. Namely, the monstrous entity known only as Sin, which reincarnates itself indefinitely to bring destruction and death to this cursed land. Born long ago in the ancient city of Zanarkand, the life of Yevon is a mystery. We know that he was the greatest summoner the city had produced at the time, and he eventually rose to become the leader of Zanarkand. At some point, Zanarkand entered a conflict with the city of Bavel, which at the time was a mighty technological power in the world. Seeing no way for Zanarkand to win, and seeking to preserve it at all costs, Yevon convinces the remaining citizens of Zanarkand to sacrifice themselves and become Faith in order to use their essence to summon a dream Zanarkand, which through them would live in perpetuity as it was at the height of its power and prosperity. In sacrificing themselves, a massive amount of pyreflies were created which enabled Yevon to gather them and transform them into an armor for himself and Dream Zanarkand. The armor he created was Sin. Upon creating Sin, he orders it to destroy any and all machines, so as to put a stop to the inevitable march of technological progress in order to keep Zanarkand safe for all eternity. Although Sin was the greatest destructive force the world had ever known, it wasn't immortal or indestructible. Born of the living energy of thousands of souls, it was itself a sentient and living creation, and thus required energy to sustain itself. Knowing this, he gives instructions to his daughter, Yunalesca, on how to quote-unquote defeat Sin. She thus creates a religion centered around these teachings, which instructs the people of Spira that Sin is essentially immortal, but can be destroyed temporarily for 7 years, resulting in peace for a time. She divulges to them that in order to do so, summoners must go on a pilgrimage, collecting the power of various aeons, using their power to sacrifice themselves and someone close to them to create a new and extremely powerful aeon capable of destroying Sin. Unbeknownst to the summoners, however, once Sin is destroyed, it absorbs the essence of the final aeon and slowly rebuilds itself, keeping Spira in an endless cycle of death, but giving hope to the people so it can also preserve the life of Spira, thus creating a limitless supply of energy for Sin to fuel itself and its reconstruction. Sin is drawn to machines, and the fear of Sin causes the people of Spira to put a halt to advancing technology, lest they draw Sin to themselves. Now, it's stated by the Faith who summoned Dream Zanarkand that Yevon is neither good nor evil. He is simply an engine, his sole purpose being to fuel Dream Zanarkand and keep it alive. However, I feel this is inaccurate. His creation of Sin and the subsequent creation of this macabre religion is incredibly diabolical. While the intention to save one's home no matter the cost is often seen as noble, in this case, his selfish desire to preserve Zanarkand as it was at its height causes immense suffering to the entire populace of Spira. Not only does Sin bring destruction, but the religion of Yevon has within its ranks members of a corrupt clergy, who while knowing the truth of Sin, choose to prop up its existence, rather than bring an end to the woes of their world. In the end, he never prevented the destruction of Zanarkand. Rather, he destroyed it himself with the advent of Sin, and created an illusion of Zanarkand, a fantasy that has no basis in reality. While it certainly can't be argued that Bavel was right in its attempts to destroy Zanarkand, neither can it be argued that Yevon was right in his willingness to sacrifice the lives of millions of people over thousands of years so he could conjure an illusion of his homeland. Due to using his power in this terrifying way, whether initially or over the passage of time, Yevon himself has turned into a sort of insect-like creature, which as far as we know, is void of any sort of sentience. Now, it's entirely possible that Yevon is still conscious of his actions and continues to conjure Dream Zanarkand of his own volition, but I'd like to think that the form he inhabits is the price he has paid for his selfish actions. He is reduced to a parasite, a blight upon the world that is a slave to his own creation, doomed to bring death, destruction, and despair for all eternity to all the people that inhabit Spira, doing all this to satisfy his own selfish desire of preserving a dying city. This is essentially the bulk of the information we are given on Yevon, as in the game he is more of an indirect villain than a primary antagonist, the mystery that surrounds him being part of what makes him such an interesting villain. However, from these bits of information, we can make a terrifying conclusion about Yevon. He was a man consumed by a desperate desire to preserve his homeland no matter the cost, and in the end, we find that he has become the victim of his own desires. A victim of the most tragic kind of evil. An evil that is born from a deep love that is subsequently corrupted into the very antithesis of itself, bringing death, destruction, and despair through a noble desire to preserve one's home. This can be seen as a lesson. Good intentions are not always good, and evil is not always intentional. I hope you've enjoyed this analysis of Yevon. Leave a comment below if you think I've left out anything important, and feel free to leave the name of one of your favorite villains and I may feature them in an upcoming episode. Thank you for stopping by, and as always, I'll be seeing you soon.